It's like two
Totally
houses in
remodeled.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know, yeah, that one.
Yeah, and
I know who
it's all like
remodeled
green.
that one. I'm not
Good.
This is always the longest minute of
Yes.
the day.
I've got 3.
Let me make sure it started. Okay, we're ready.
All right. Call the meeting to order. This is the March 2023 work session for the Mayor and City Council, City of Frostburg. Roll call when you're ready.
Commissioner Donnie Carter.
Here.
Commissioner Nina Forsythe.
Here.
Commissioner Kevin Grove.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Ritchie.
Here.
And Mayor Robert Flanagan.
Here.
Okay, so first today is the utility rate study presentation. We have with us Michael and Nick, and they're going to go over what they've come up with so far. Elaine and Trevor and I have been meeting with them off and on for several months now. What we've kind of come to the conclusion on in our most recent meeting on Monday is looking at structural changes to the water rate. So right now we chart our water rate is volumetric only, and then we have the water surcharge that only goes towards the Piney Dam and that part of the system, the source water, and that primarily just pays debt service. Looking at alternative rates. If we were to present an alternative rate to you for your consideration, we also have to make sure that Allegheny County is very much agreeable and on board with that and how we calculate things. And all that being said, I don't think we're in a position to recommend any structural changes to your rate structure right now. We'd probably make that recommendation for 2025 fiscal year next spring, when we've been able to negotiate with the county and make sure that they're happy and, have been able to explore different rate structures and then look at how that will impact each customer, each type of customer, the large commercial to the elderly person living alone and everything in between. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. I have a brief presentation. If you have questions along the way, stop me. This can be more of a discussion. So this is the guiding principles and objective of the study. So the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund should be financially self-supporting. So that means they shouldn't be subsidized by the general fund. They can certainly, pay to the general fund for any support services, so finance, IT, things like that. And I know there's a corporate overhead for that. They should maintain reserves, provide for contingencies, unplanned expenses, and then the rates should be kept as low as possible over time. And you see we've italicized over time because you can defer maintenance and keep rates really low right now, and then eventually you're going to have some really big project blow up in downtown. You have to repair the mains. So the goal is to try to get those to a point where we can just do small incremental increases each year. So the objective is to ensure rates are stable through sound financial management and system maintenance. And we do that by reviewing the funds and then preparing a long-term financial plan. So some of the factors that affect charges and rates, obviously your operating maintenance expenses. This is your salaries, your benefits, materials, things like that. We've assumed a 5% increase in inflation for the sanitary commission charges. So that's the charges they charge you. I think that's what we've seen historically, so we're keeping that assumption. And then we've just got about a 2.5% to 3% each year for other expenses. I think there was a one-time increase for salaries we had in there. So more of historical inflation. I know this year we're seeing a lot higher inflation, but hopefully in the future we'll get that down to something more conservative. CIP is obviously going to be a big factor, so any investments you're making in treatment distribution or the collection systems. I think right now the largest capital project you have are probably the CSO surcharge funded ones. And a large portion of those are going to be debt funded and then paid through the CSO surcharge. So that brings me to debt service, so both existing and future debt. So any principal and interest payments you're paying now through the surcharges, and then any future debt payments, we actually calculate those payments based on the capital projects. Historically, we haven't seen much of a change in customers, so the actual number of customers each year, so we're just keeping that flat and seeing it relatively built out. And then the same thing on usage and sewage generation. So we look at those separately because sometimes you might be adding a few customers, but they're using less, so you might have a lower growth rate for actual usage. Some places you might even see a little bit of a decline in usage, so you may still be growing, but people are using less because low flow fixtures, smaller household sizes, things like that. And then just being conservative on miscellaneous revenues. This is things other than surcharges, other than rates. This is like, I think the sundry sales, interest. We're just assuming no growth in those are going to be relatively flat. Then we looked at these reserve targets. So we're shooting for a policy goal of 180 days of operating expenses. So that's roughly 50% of what you spend on operating expenses kept in a rainy day or cash balance for the two funds that have operating expenses, and then for the other two funds, the surcharge ones, just 50% of those total costs. So part of the examination of the rates is also, I know you don't charge a connection fee right now, but I just want to give you a relationship of connection fees and the relationship between growth and non-growth expenses. So operating expenses, those must be collected through user rates. You can't collect those from connection fees. But capital expenses, they can either be system maintenance, so that's just improvements in your system, not really increasing capacity. Those are called non-growth. Or system expansion, so you're actually increasing the capacity in the plant, the MGDs. And you can either cash fund or debt fund those, but typically the non-growth expenses should be paid to user rates, which is existing customers, what they pay. And then system expansion, they can also either be cash or debt funded. And ideally those are paid through connection fees so that growth pays its own way. So new customers, if they're causing you to incur expenses or having to expand the system, they should be paying for that. There is one caveat though, that if connection fees are set at less than what they cost or anticipated growth does not happen, so you plan all these projects and you think you're going to have these huge developments and it doesn't end up happening, then existing customers would have to pay for those growth related costs through user rates because there's really no other way to get those. You don't have any issues right now with this because you don't really have any growth related expenses, and I know you don't have a connection fee on the books, but that is one thing we looked at if you did want to have that connection fee for any new development that comes on board. So the revenue requirement at the bottom again is just the operating maintenance expenses. So the revenue requirement is just the revenue required to be collected, just another fancy term for costs. Then we stack on top of that any outstanding debt, any capital improvement projects, and if those are going to be cash funded, they come directly from rates or reserves. If they're going to be debt funded, we calculate that debt, and then the contributions to reserves. So we add all that up, that's your revenue requirement. We list out any miscellaneous revenues, and that's your net revenue requirement. I had my notes here to some of your largest expenses. So your largest is the sanitary commission charges, which is as you'd expect. It's about 1.2 million in 23. Then your water filtration contract to MES, paying that is about 560,000. Then it'd be your overhead charges back to the general fund, I assume that is. Then you've got some debt service that you've been paying off over time, some of the CSO projects, some Piney projects, the Piney Dam project, raw water line, and then Savage Run. And then the largest that I mentioned before for your new capital projects is really the CSO projects, and those are going to be a portion debt funded and grant funded. So I'm going to break down, really looking at 4 different components here. So the water surcharge, water rates, the CSO surcharge, and then sewer rates. So this first one here is just the water surcharge. So I'm going to show you 4 slides. The chart on the left is going to be the costs. So those colored column bars. So that little blue there is just operating expenses associated with the water surcharge. And then the red is the debt service, because that's really what the surcharge pays for, is that debt service. That dark blue line going across, that's how much you're bringing in right now in revenue. So as long as that line is above the stacked bars, you're having a surplus each year. So you can then build that up into reserve to pay for any other surcharge projects. If those bars are higher than the line, then you have a shortfall. And so then the chart on the right is that cash balance. So the blue is your ending cash balance. Right now we're conservatively assuming you don't have any cash in the water surcharge cash balance. But as you have these surpluses each year, it would build up to have a little sum there. And that red is that target, that 50% I mentioned, that 180 days. So as long as that blue is above the red line, you're meeting the target, and you can use that excess cash for projects or expenses. And I've kept all these on the same scale, so the $3 million scale, so you can see the difference between each fund. So we are not reflecting any increase, so you see that dark blue line. There's also a light blue line. They're exactly the same, because we're not anticipating any increase to the water surcharge. And this is over a base year of 23 and the next 5 years. So next is looking at water rates. So these are the usage rates, which are volumetric. Again, expenses in the left here. So here you can see where all the operating expenses are. There's some slight green there, which is cash funding of capital projects. So that's projects coming straight out of the water fund. And those are really the only two expenses on water. And then the light blue line is current revenue. Since that is lower than those bars, that means it's a shortfall. So the dark blue line is what we would propose in additional revenue you need to collect. And that reflects, according to that note there, about 9% increase in revenue each year. So ideally, if you raise everybody's rates by this 9%, everybody have the same bill increase. It's when we look at an alternative that different bills would change differently. So then on the right, there's the cash balance. Again, here we're assuming there's no real cash balance for water. It's very minuscule, and you can see that building up because we're raising that 9%. We're able to build up those expenses, that revenue. The CSO surcharge. This is for your CSO projects. No operating expenses here. This is just debt service and then the new debt service. So that purple is new debt service being calculated from new capital projects. But as you can see, what you're bringing in right now covers those expenses. So there's no anticipated increases here. And then you can see a slight balance being built up without even having to raise the CSO surcharge. And then sewer rates. Again, here it's all just operating expenses. Those sanitary charges are in here, salaries, things like that. So you can see the light blue line is what you're bringing in now, and then you need about a 4% increase each year in order to meet that target. So the sewer fund does look like it has about $1 million in it in 23. So there's a little bit of a starting balance there, so the increases aren't as high. So now let's talk about the actual charges and rates. So this is what you currently charge. So the top portion of this chart are the surcharges, so those are your fixed charges. You have some customers are monthly, some are quarterly. So your inside city customers have a water and sewer monthly or quarterly bill, depending on the frequency of billing. You have outside city customers. You have county customers who are part of the Eckhart connection. That's a monthly charge. And then you have other county customers who are outside of the Eckhart connection. And then you have the university, which pays the same as the inside city monthly. Then the usage rate, so that's just the fixed portion, and then the usage rate varies by how much you use. And this is a two-tiered system, so your first 0 to 50,000 gallons is charged one rate, and if you go over 50,000, you're charged per thousand at a different rate. You can see that these vary by inside city, outside, county, and then the university. You'll see the university actually has a higher tier allowance from 0 to 500,000 gallons. And these do not change whether you are monthly or quarterly, which typically if you're quarterly, you'd have 3 times the tiers as monthly, or monthly would be 1/3 the tiers of quarterly. So that is one thing we probably do suggest revising, as I'll show you on the next slide. So again here, the top is the current, so monthly or quarterly surcharges, and you'll see I note this based on FTE. So an FTE is a Frostburg dwelling equivalent, and so it's essentially how many gallons per day. I think the average was at some points 104 gallons per day, which is about 38,000 gallons per year. So if you are a non-residential customer, you will pay multiples of that if your usage in the past year was more than 104 gallons per day. And then you have that two-tiered usage rates from 0 to 50 and over 50, regardless of billing frequency. So some of the alternative considerations we looked at was, instead of going by the FDE, was basing it on AWWA, which is American Waterworks Association, meter size equivalents, and I'll show you on the next slide what those look like. But essentially, if you have a larger meter size, you can pull more water from the system, a higher demand, and so the water through your meter is higher gallons per minute, so you could pay higher multiple than somebody who has a 5/8 inch. So if you have a 1 inch, there's a basis there to pay more than the base one.
Are you talking that as an alternative that could be presented to customers if they wanted that, or
No.
just everybody
Just
gets
discussion
that?
here, yeah, we would, that's one of those things we're still looking at because it's a little tricky going from the FTEs, this would be for the fixed charge portion, from the FTEs to American Water Works. Because I mean, you could have a customer now, they're on a 2-inch, they're a commercial customer, and they have, I don't know, 50 FTEs. And so then how many equivalents would that be for a 2-inch? So it gets a little difficult. It's best it's a number, I'll show you on the next slide, it's the number of units you're dividing by. So essentially we would have less units than we have FTEs, so the cost per unit goes up, which doesn't help the small user who's always a 1 equivalent, either if they're an FTE or American Water Works, because then now they're paying a higher unit cost. And it might be a little more helpful by showing the next slide. So that was one thing we've looked at. We're not sure exactly how to get there. Maybe it's a phase-in over time. It might be too tough to do in 1 year. But that's kind of one of the things we're looking at. The other thing, just on the 2-tiered usage, as I mentioned before, it should really be, if you're going to have quarterly and monthly, the quarterly tiers should just be 3 times the monthly. Or the monthly should be 1/3 the quarterly. So if you're at 0 to 50 right now, regardless of monthly or quarterly, the easiest thing would just be make the quarterly 0 to 150. So any customers who right now are quarterly would be at that lower rate for more usage. So you do have some customers now that are over 50,000 gallons who jump into that second tier, quarterly customers. They would stay in that first tier until they get to 150. So, and we can set it so whatever rate design we come up with, they both bring in the same amount of revenue, but it's which customers does it affect. So we always say customers don't care what their rates are, they want to know what their bill's going to be, because that's what they're looking at, the water and sewer bill. So this table shows customer accounts by meter size. So that column on the left there are the different meter sizes. As you would expect, majority of your customers are residential, single family, 5/8, 3/4 inch. So that's probably 90-95% of your customer base. Then your larger customers are going to be larger homes or small commercial, industrial. And then you see it broken out by different class. So inside city monthly, you only have 1 inside city monthly at 5/8 inch. Majority are in that inside city quarterly, 1,800 customers. There's just 2 outside city monthly customers. So most of your outside city quarterly are quarterly. There's the 1 county Eckhart connection, that's a 2-inch. And then you've got 6 county master meter non-Eckhart connections, and those are all charged monthly. And then the 1 Frostburg state connection is an 8-inch. So at the bottom, you'll see those bottom 3 rows. So that's just purely the number of accounts. So you have 36 inside city monthly, 2,300 inside city quarterly. And then if you were, so right now you're charging your fixed charges based on the second one, the city equivalents, the FDEs, so the Frostburg dwelling equivalents. And so you can see how many units that is. For example, inside city quarterly, it's 3,186 units. If we just did it based on American Water Works, that bottom row, which is tied to the second column, the AWA equivalents. You can see a 1 inch is 2.5 times what a 5/8 inch is. That would give you, for the inside city quarterly, 2,600 as opposed to 31. So we're essentially dividing by a lower number now, which is giving us a higher per unit cost, which does not help the 1 equivalent, which is the 5/8 3/4 inch. So I don't know how palatable that is, because when you look at a sample bill, which I don't have in here, but you can imagine what that does. So maybe there's a hybrid approach, or maybe, I don't know, we just look at commercial, or it's something we still want to talk about. Then lastly, just connection fees. So what these are is this offsets the capital costs of the large backbone capacity, so the treatment system, major pumping stations, things like that. There's really 3 methods of calculating this. So there's historical costs, where you look at kind of the buy-in method of buying into all the system asset value that you've built up, all your current customers have built up. If you had any projects that were expanding capacity, we look at the future cost of that capacity, which you don't really have any projects that are expanding capacity, so we don't really calculate that one. And then there's just a weighted average of the 2. So just using the historical cost of capacity. So I think your most recent fees were about $500 per connection, regardless of meter size. So if you were a single family home, or if you were an entire apartment building, you still paid that 500. Or I think it was per unit for apartment building. But if you were a large commercial, say you want like a 6-inch meter, you only paid the $500, which I think we've seen from American Water Works Association, there's a justification to charge more for that larger meter size. So when we did the calculation, we came up with about $1,200 for the base for water and about $2,400 for sewer. These are just as high as you could go, maximally legally based on the calculation. You don't have to raise them this high. You don't have to raise them at all. You don't have to establish any connection fee, but this would help you have new customers pay their fair share so existing customers don't have to cover those costs. So that's a lot to take in. Any questions or discussion?
You said you didn't see any growth in number of customers or usage, but I thought usage was going down because of things like low flow, toilets and so forth.
Yes,
Is
you'd
that
have
something that we've seen over the
You'd have
last?
negative growth, yeah. So
Yeah.
we could have put in actually a negative, and then your rate increase would have to be even higher. Where I showed water was 9%. If you're losing 1% in growth every year, then it's a 10% increase to get back up. Yeah, we had put in 0. We can certainly put a negative in.
Oh,
but
so this is.
it doesn't help.
I thought you looked. I know. It
It makes
doesn't
it
help.
worse, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of variables in the last 5 years. Like there used to use a lot of water out at Cabin Run Road with that coal mining operation, and that's tapered off. FSU's usage went way down during
Right.
COVID, and that's coming back up. But it's not a predictable or stable trend at this point.
And now do you want to bring up Laconia?
Yeah, I mean, and then right now we're producing a lot more water with Lonaconee. Not sure where that will end up. So
Right.
that's adding revenue right now
Right,
for the
yeah.
current fiscal year.
But there's
Assuming,
uncertainty as far as the future goes.
yeah. So between, I think the big stumbling block right now is we want to have a rate that has some fixed charges that go towards system maintenance. So,
Yeah.
I mean, maintaining the water lines in the streets, maintaining the water treatment plant, paying your employees are all fixed charges. And
Right.
we don't have any fixed revenue to cover any of that. The only thing that's a variable expense is your electricity and your chemicals at the plant. So, obviously, you do the volumetric charge so that the bigger users pay more, but what we run into a lot right now is vacant homes pay nothing other than their surcharges when they're vacant, but there's still there's still capacity in the system allocated toward them. So getting a minimum to cover the operational fixed expenses from those homes would certainly provide some stability to your revenues.
It's a tricky dance to be able to cover, as you said, the retiree on a fixed income and, all the future.
Yeah, so, and then making it so it's less difficult, not more difficult to calculate, figuring out a rate structure that's palatable to the county first, and then how we're going to adapt or create a new formula other than the Public Service Commission formula to calculate the county's rate based on, the expenses that we agree that they should be responsible for. It's just I don't know.
So our current upgrades at Piney are not being paid anymore by the county. So maybe we have some negotiating wiggle room with them.
What do you mean
Well,
by
I mean,
that?
the reason that the rate is lower in the county is because they said, their investment in Piney 30 years ago or whatever. But the improvements we're making now, the county isn't paying for. And so why do they continue to have, but it's, it's benefiting everybody in the system.
Right.
So maybe,
I think that the cost of the improvements we're making now is like a small drop in the bucket, though.
compared to the original, yeah.
It's
We can
hundreds
still
of thousands of dollars of ARPA money. It's just So it's not.
We can still make, you can try to make that case.
I mean, I think many of you have a good relationship with the county public works people as well as Hayden and I. So, you know, I think, and we've worked through, Chris and I and John in years past have worked on the opposite side where they're setting our rates and, you know, have revamped things that are just like simple and everyone agrees that they're fair. And it just, you know, I think we're in a good place to continue to work through it all. There's just a lot of complexities here because of
Yeah.
changing the structural.
And there are a lot of moving parts to it.
And it coinciding with everything else budget-wise, just
Yeah.
like my brain starts to feel mushy. That really gets me a good vote of confidence, doesn't it?
Mushy.
Is there anything like you would like them to look at or consider going forward since we're kind of slowing down a little bit, so to speak?
I think having that fixed portion would be helpful, especially for financial reliability, because
Yeah.
like you're saying, if we're using less water, you have to keep raising the usage rate just to get to the
Yeah.
same point. Now we can't go to 80% fixed because 80% of your costs are fixed, but because that would really hurt a small user. But some portion, and that's something you could vary by meter size. You're not having to do this FDE equivalent calculation every year. It's something that's stable unless they change their meter out. But it's because you've already have that system, it's tough to do in 1 year. You probably have to phase it in over
Right.
time. But we have a financial model that's all built in Excel. It has a spreadsheet for every cost, and it's got sample bills. So we can actually look at, okay, your top 50 customers, how are they affected? How is a typical residential affected? And that becomes, property of the city. So hopefully you can do these updates in the
Yeah.
future.
Well, we appreciate it, guys.
So Elaine and I'll continue to work with NewGen and we'll get somewhere.
Okay.
We'll get there. There you go. We'll get there. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming all the way up
No
here for
problem.
27
Yep.
minutes.
That was a nice drive.
Yeah, you have a nice day today. Tomorrow, not so much.
Is it supposed to snow?
Yeah.
I'm not preparing salt over here.
Yeah, I always get, I'm like, oh, it's gonna snow. As a kid, I had no idea what that was.
Yeah, right.
Well, you probably haven't touched your snow budget this year much. The salt
Right.
budget.
Oh, wow.
That's good.
Tell me the amount of gravel that's on the road too. It's like a lot less.
Overdue.
It's not supposed to get too cold.
All right. Have a good night.
All right, yeah,
Thanks,
take care.
guys.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care. Okay, budget. The worst meeting of the year. So picking up where we left off at the February work session, there's probably 3 big expenses, or new expenses, I should say, that we've factored in to preparing the draft budget. So, excluding ARPA, because, that is money coming in, money coming out, or any other grant funds that we have. but this draft budget includes participation in the LEOPS pension system. It includes a salary increase. I'm hoping to get a copy of the county salary study next week. They've been tweaking that a little bit from what I understand, but from what I know, salary increases were done by position generally and range from 18 to 13% for the county. The city employees generally are all paid less than county employees. And then the state of Maryland in the governor's budget is an 18% increase for all state employees. So city employees are again paid much less in general than state employees. So in an effort to retain your talented and competent workforce, we've included an overall salary increase of 13%. Not saying that we're going to recommend an across-the-board increase. I think there's some finer adjustments that are needed in just different departments and different areas to help, keep the positions that need more that's just a general number to work with. So that's a big expense. And then one capital equipment expense that we've proposed in this budget that wouldn't be ARPA funded because it's just something that we need to purchase every so often is a plow truck. State bid on an international is not too bad. It's like $180,000, maybe a little less, but that's a guesstimate with getting the stainless steel bed and everything.
Which is a good price.
Yeah, anything not looking at the different brands not on state bid, you're probably looking at $30,000-$40,000 more than that.
In excess of
So that's, a lot of money, but those are the couple big items. So I will let Elaine talk about the draft budget, and then we can get into the other things.
So for your meeting today, rather than giving you line-by-line budget detail, we're just going to talk in generalities, summary just by fund and department, because at this stage, the budget is unbalanced. And as Elizabeth has already addressed, we're looking at salary increases overall, but those tweaks have not been made to get it correctly between departments and funds. So to give you a detailed budget at this point would not be an accurate representation of where we think we will end up with the budget ordinance. And we have not balanced the budget at this point, and that also needs to be accomplished. But what we wanted to do is give you a general overview, talking about general assumptions in the budget and how the funds look at this stage. So at this point, the only fund that has sufficient revenue to meet expenses would be in the water surcharge fund. And the draft budget at this point has no changes in rates, so it's budgeted based on the same real estate tax rate, the same utility rates and surcharge rates, which those rates still need to be determined. But in the water surcharge fund, we are paying off a significant portion of debt in May. We have our final payoff. So because of that debt being paid off, the expenses in that fund will be significantly less in the next fiscal year than the current year. So as Michael pointed out in his presentation, the utility funds do have to be self-supporting. They have to operate like a private business enterprise. So the revenues of those funds will need to be sufficient to meet the expenses, whether that's through reserves, which right now only the sewer fund has some reserves, or it's going to have to go through some adjustments in revenues. We do have significant ARPA projects continuing in the next fiscal year, and those are reflected in the total city budget to the tune of about $3.8 million spread between each fund. litigation insurance expense and your pension expense. So increasing that one element, you're going to have the domino effect. And again, that affects all funds that have employees. For purposes of estimating insurance, we did get some guidance from a meeting we had yesterday with an insurance representatives from CBIZ, and they're projecting that we're going to see about a 13.5% increase in our property insurance. And on top of that rate increase, they increase values every year by about 4%. There would be modest increases expected for auto insurance and general liability insurance. We do expect workers' compensation, the rate itself, to hold steady. Our experience mod, which is based on your last 3 years of claims, that experience mod has decreased this year because we had large claims from 2018 that are now dropping off the calculation. But we would still see an overall increase in workers' comp because of salary increases. For health and dental insurance, at this point, I don't have any information from our broker to know what type of increase to expect, so this budget includes an estimate of 7%. As we get more information, we can refine those numbers. So just to give a couple highlights by fund, in the corporate fund, as I mentioned, this draft is based on maintaining the same rate, but we did have an increase in assessable base. So the constant yield tax rate would be 66.56 cents per $100 of assessed value, and our current rate is 70 cents. So that's something that you will have to consider, how you would like the rate to be set with real estate taxes. Maryland income tax is the second highest source of recurring revenue for the city in the corporate fund. For this year, I've budgeted $150,000 higher than the fiscal year 23 budget, but that's less than we actually brought in fiscal year 22, so there's some variability there. That is a significant budgeted increase in revenue for the corporate fund. There are several large capital projects in the corporate fund for the coming year. Those would include the comprehensive plan that's needed, the Mechanic Street parking lot construction, the child care center construction, salt storage facility construction, significant investment in street paving, and a vac truck drying bed, and as mentioned, the plow truck. So all those are built into the corporate fund expenses. The transition to LEOPS for the certified police officers would result in an increase in pension expense within the public safety budget. We would recommend taking the 457 special police enhancement and removing that, given they would have a LEOPS. The net effect in the next fiscal year, or approximating, is going to be about a $200,000 increase in the public safety budget to make that transition to LEOPS for fiscal year 24. In the water fund, again, we would be projecting revenue consistent with the prior year if we were to maintain current rates, and we'll have to continue to have discussion about what the intended rate should be for next year based on the need for covering expenses. There's about $550,000 of ARPA projects budgeted in the water fund in the draft budget. Those projects include the Centennial Hill water line, general water treatment plant projects, general water projects, and a treatment plant system upgrade. And we've done a conservative estimate to increase the MES contract expense just because we've been advised the increasing price of chemicals may require a budget amendment to that contract. In the sewer fund, again, we're trying to project revenue that would be consistent with the current year, but we know expenses are continuing to rise. Sanitary sewer commission charges, we've seen an increase between the bills from July through January of this year compared to last year, about 11%. So for this budget, I increased overall 15% compared to the fiscal year 22 actual numbers. We've already discussed the water surcharge fund and paying off the debt. There is ARPA project garbage fund, we have seen an increase in our landfill costs, costs of fuel, employee costs, but the number of garbage customers has not changed. So we were currently seeing a shortfall in the garbage fund. So we'll need to have a discussion about whether there is a needed increase in the garbage rate to cover the increase in costs for the coming year. So again, at this stage, we're showing budget shortfalls in each of the funds except for a water surcharge, and we will work on refining some of those items and presenting you with a line-by-line budget. If any of you would like a copy of our worksheet in progress that supports these individual numbers, I'd be happy to email that to you or print one off for you here today before you leave and address any questions that you have.
Anybody? Thanks.
Anyway.
It's a challenge.
The hotel motel requests received from outside organizations. Elizabeth has a complete list of those as well. Those show up in the tourism line item in the administration budget. At this point, off the top of my head,
117,900 and 790. I don't know,
I
something
rounded it
goofy.
up to 117.80. So,
Pretty
But-
close to last year though.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that pulled up in
a
our
little
document.
higher.
It was 112 last year.
We did a budget amendment to cover some of the additional expenses in the holiday. I believe the original budget was closer to 95.
Okay.
And that compares to what we get from the hotel motel tax.
Yes, and we have been seeing an increase in the hotel motel tax revenue. So in the current fiscal year for hotel motel tax, we had budgeted $130,000. And for the next fiscal year, we've bumped that estimate up to $150,000. So comparing July to December of last year to the current fiscal year, we've seen an increase of about $14,000 higher. So it is trending higher.
Do you want to talk hotel motel tax first, or do you want to talk tax rate? We'll do hotel motel, that's
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
So I did email you these documents as well, the individual letter requests from all of the different nonprofit entities that do work here in Frostburg, and then the summary sheet. So a lot of it is flat funding. There are a few small increases from last year. $1,000 increase for cultural events, $800 for house and garden, $1,000 for the dog park. So interestingly enough, the Aryan Band by charter gets $500, but 1940, what was that budget? 47.
47.
They were given $300 by the city, so if you apply inflation to that, they probably should be getting a lot more.
So
But
we made another $50 a year.
so Palace is asking for 2,000 more. Appalachian Festival is asking for a little less. Lamppost Committee 2,000 more. FSU TV3 is asking for the cost of their streaming license, which would allow them to pick up into the live stream feed that I put out to YouTube and then broadcast that onto FSU TV3. So they're fundraising to get some new equipment and stuff. That is what they have asked of you, and they could stream as many different city meetings as we put out.
Okay.
Whoops, I'm sorry. And then the railroad is asking for $10,000 additional over last year. At WFW Center for Literary Arts did not make a request last year. They've requested $1,500 again this year, as has WFWM. And then Camp Hope has requested $1,500. Camp Hope isn't really associated with tourism,
Yeah, that's the only one I sort of had a question about.
but in their letter, they did make the point that they pay a good amount of hotel motel tax through the university, through their lodging, so they're more or less asking for a reimbursement.
It's a kind of small amount, really.
So that's just kind of an overview. The budget Elaine presented to you had that full amount going to these organizations, but if you wanted to make any reductions, we'd ask for those comments at this meeting so that we can have a better sense going forward.
I'm fine with them.
Everybody okay?
Yeah.
Anybody has any questions? The railroad, Wes is here.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. What's going on with the railroad? Wes?
Come on up.
What was that?
Come on up.
So last year, thankfully, and thank you guys all for doing the $10,000 allocation for the hotel motel tax. And I sent Liz an email.
Do your 20,000 first.
You wanna do 20,000?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, talk about this year, and then we'll go
So
back in time.
one of our employees works for the school bus service. It's out of Westminster. He got a bus donated to us because previously the railroad has never owned and operated the shuttle service in and of itself. Frostburg did it. Donnie had his personal vehicle for the Toasted Goat involved, and then Adam Forshee had his personal vehicles involved as shuttle services. And we have had numerous complaints about the hill. And I finally got out and walked it one day with the passengers to see what the experience was like. For me, it's okay, but I saw other people really struggling. And in the 2 years I've been here, Donnie's bus is out of service still. Adam's buses are something to behold. We, on the other hand, have a 75 passenger bus with air conditioning and heat that was donated for free. So what we would like to do with the 20,000 and then some other stuff from last year is we want to open an account in probably Somerset Trust, is that correct? And all of the shuttle services, the maintenance, the operating, et cetera, will come out of that fund so that we can keep people coming up into downtown. And that way, the financial responsibility of keeping the shuttle operating isn't on Donnie's checkbook, it isn't on Adam's checkbook, and quite honestly, it allows the railroad to control the destiny. Because,
You love the power.
well, no, and I just, you
I'm
know,
just kidding.
there's all kinds of goodies I could go through. But suffice to say, the railroad needs to have ownership of that so that we control our fate. As much as I preach community, part of the community, the mechanics for us is to have control of it. That way we, you know, that lane is right there, probably needs to be denoted that it's, you know, that's where the bus is going to be. We pick people up, we bring them over to the hotel. You know, some quick little metrics. I did walk the entire town. It was on a day when the hot cocoa was here. And the train had 100 plus on one of the trips and 70 on one of the trips on a Saturday. And they're struggling to get up from down there to get up to the top. I was able to walk it, and I went in every business that was open. And I did every business in 47 minutes and a half, and I bought something from 2 or 3 of them. So, and that, you know, went in the hotel, went in everything. We want to make sure that, especially in September, October, and in Christmas, that we have a motive, you know, piece of motive transportation to get people uptown. Polar Express, the railroad's numbers for Polar Express, believe it or not, Frostburg 2 years in a row has bested Cumberland. We actually ran more people on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday in one solid block than we do out of Cumberland, and the largest train of the year, 2 years in a row, is out of Frostburg. 597 in 2021 and 630 something in 22. And last year the sheriff came by, and they were not pleased with the way the traffic was working. And I mean, we all saw it. It was very crowded down there. So we need to be able to
Along
bring,
New Hope Road,
right.
yeah.
In 2021, we carried about 2,200 is what we figured by the BSA, the Boy Scouts of America bus. They weren't available this year. And 2,200 people, if you do the math, is what about 500 cars, 450 cars. If you take the 450 out of that circulation pattern, it'd make a huge difference.
Sure.
And we don't want there to be pressure on everybody. We want them to come and we want to do it out of Frostburg and we should do it out of Frostburg, but we would benefit the entire community by having the shuttle. So that's what we want to do with the 20,000. And now may I talk about the other?
Yeah, so,
Are you gonna like do it up like a trolley?
So we do know we're gonna use the Toasted Goat, we're gonna use the Frostburg seal, the Maryland flag, the American flag, the train, most likely the rail bikes and the depot. And that'll segue into the 10,000 from last year. We had asked for 10,000 to do some detailing around the depot. Well, no sooner did we get awarded that when there started to be back office meanderings of the county actually getting some grant money, and that has now happened. So instead of using the 10,000 for landscaping and some lights and things that we were going to do, the county is actually coming in and they're going to expand the restroom capacity. They're going to add lights to the platform, and the platform is coming down, and they're going to redeck, because this last year at Polar we had 4 people fall between the train and the deck. The deck gets slick. It's made of wood. It's been there 20 some odd years. You can't see, and so meeting with Adam Patterson, we came up with how we think we're going to do all the lighting, and they're going to be able to do a lot more with the grant they have than we could have done with 10,000. Flip side is we can take the 10. We did request disbursement this last week, and we want to take that and open the account with Somerset, because we like to give back to the community the best we can, and that's a good way to do it. And we'll manage all the shuttle service out of that account, out of Somerset Trust. So that's the plan. That's what we'd like to do. Any questions for me?
Where, years ago, I don't know if you all were on council at the time, we did give $5,000 to Frostburg First to run shuttle to the county. Did that come out of the hotel motel tax fund, or was that something else?
And they submitted actual receipts
Okay.
as
I
far
just-
as which,
And that's one of the reasons I want to run it out of a different bank account, is because then that bank account will just solely be for the shuttle. And it'll be a very easy thing. Literally, you can take the statement and see fuel. The only thing you won't see is the expense of our driver. We do have a driver, local, Bill is his name.
Gotcha.
And then we have 2 on our staff, if need be. They both are licensed to operate school buses because they do it in their everyday life.
Right.
And so, one way or the other, we'll have 3 people that can do the shuttle bus. It's kind of cool. It's air conditioned, because June, July, August is not pleasant in a hot car. So
it's an air-conditioned school bus.
yes, it is.
Fancy.
Oh yeah, they only the best for Hagerstown. I think that's where it served. It's a 2006, and it was their backup school bus until the day it came to us. And
I'm sorry.
it made it all the way. It made it all the way down the interstate, surprisingly enough. But we've done some retrofitting to make some things safer and last longer on it, and we're going to take it and have it. We'll have it certified up at Grantsville. So International does not do it in Cumberland. They will not do buses, even though it is an international bus. But they won't do it there. So, but Grantsville will.
So will the driver wear a little train hat?
I don't know. I think we
You
want to
can
try
make
to
that a
make we want to
stipulation.
make it look like the city of Frostburg if there was an image, but we also want it to look like the railroad.
Yeah.
So it'll have the Western Maryland Railroading logo and whatnot from the waist. The window band up will look like a train car, and everything under we're going to take to Kelly's and say, "Here's some pictures. Go nuts." So that's the plan.
Everyone, I didn't feel comfortable just making the change to last year's allocation in terms of use. So is there consensus that is okay to put the 10,000 toward the bus? check next week. She has your request in her inbox now, and
Okay.
Yeah.
we're good with
And
this.
if there's any businesses and things that want to be on there, the more the merrier. So probably can get with Frostburg first. They might have some good still photography we can use. So, but I wanted to stop by and say thank you, and then ask for the change. So
Thanks, Wes.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
thank you guys. If you are done with me, I'm gonna go on to the next challenge.
Okay.
So thank you guys. Have a great
All right,
afternoon.
we'll catch up.
Okay, so next up, is the constant yield tax rate certification. So keeping your tax rate the same will yield you an additional approximately $273,000. It's the difference between line 5 here and line 9 here, keeping the tax rate the same. So in the state of Maryland, for county and municipal governments, if that increase of keeping your tax rate the same is going to exceed a small amount, I can't remember what that small amount is, you are required by state law to do the constant yield tax rate hearing. And that language in that ad that is in the paper is mandated by the state of Maryland. And if it isn't exactly how they want it, you can't change your tax rate or keep your tax rate the same, and it'll automatically go back to the constant yield tax rate. But that language reads that you are increasing taxes, which is
Misleading.
you are increasing your tax revenue by keeping your tax rate the same. Based on just the cost of everything going up, and looking at keeping your salaries competitive and giving your police officers a retirement on par with the other agencies in the county, I wouldn't recommend going with the constant yield tax rate, and it would make things easier going through the budgeting process and trying to balance the budget if you kept your tax rate the same. If you wanted to make a minor decrease, there's potential that could be accommodated, but typically the constant yield tax rate hearing is done at the April meeting so that your budget ordinance hearing can be done at the May meeting. So we do need direction on the tax rate today.
Nice. Yeah, for keeping it the same.
Commissioner Grove.
He wants us to bribe him.
Could you give us something, with keeping it the same and a small reduction, what that would look like?
Like
Yeah.
0.68 or something, or?
Well, 0.68 is probably gonna it'd probably take about $200,000 off of that. So let me just pull up Excel right now, and we can just look at those scenarios.
Another thing to keep in mind, part of the increase in the assessable base is for new construction, which falls under your RETSA, which you've already pledged through the RETSA, you're giving back to the developer a portion of that going forward. The RETSA shows up on a different line item when we're budgeting for taxes. So, while that's not a significant number, it is a factor going forward. So
And-
the total increase in your assessable base is not all to be maintained by Prosper.
And and also one of the other contributors to that increase would be the toilet paper factory, a big commercial space. So,
I mean, I know my base went up
yeah, I mean,
tremendously.
I know.
So, I mean, you know, in your, it's the cost of
Yeah.
owning property is what it is. I mean, some houses might not have seen an increase at all in their base. Some people that have done improvements, I mean, what, you gotta expect it. It's the same people who, go out and do an appraisal for them, if the assessor says their house is worth 100,000 and you appraise it for 100, they're complaining that it's worth 200.
Right.
You know.
I'm not very good at Excel under pressure. Whoops. I messed my formula up.
I guess, does Berkeley Springs Instruments, is this their first year being taxed out there? Because they've only really been in there a few months, haven't they?
No, they've been there for, we had the ribbon cutting, what, at least a year ago.
Oh, no.
Well, they've been in the building approximately a year.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm getting somewhere.
School football,
Get in there, dollar sign. Okay.
they're kind of cold.
They did.
Yeah.
I think it was supposed to be that much. Just, so they're out there putting pre-treatment on the roads.
So each penny you're losing about 31,000. Is that correct?
Did you say 39?
Something's wrong with my math still. Do I know how to work a computer? I don't know. There we go. Oh my god. Something's wrong.
Yeah, because currently it's 0.7, but
I know. I don't know what I've done wrong here. Okay, 624. So that's right. That's right. Okay. So yeah, for each penny, it's $39,000. I don't know where I got the 275 from. I'm crazy. I'm sorry. It's $134,000.
Increase.
Yeah. That doesn't even pay for your LEOPS, really.
I say just leave it the same.
Of that 134, probably half of that is attributed to the new construction and
Mhm.
improvements out at the industrial park, maybe even more than that. So, if you take, even if you take 60,000 and base that on the number of dwellings in town, you're talking less than probably $25 or $30 a house on average. Obviously, if it's worth more, it's going to be a little bit more, a little bit less for others.
I'd say let's keep it where it is.
So much of what you fund out of your out of that is paying for your people and all these other expenses that we have to pay like everyone else that is going up. So consensus to keep it at 70. Okay. That hearing ad will be in the paper and that'll be at your April meeting.
So you,
One positive thing is that they didn't give you any positive reinforcement, Michael and Nick, but the water and sewer rates are very close to where they need to be. And oftentimes when they get called into jurisdictions, they're looking at major deficits that they are trying to figure out how to increase. He told us there's a town they're working in Maryland that's 50% below where they need to be. So kudos to you to keeping your water and sewer accounts running in a solvent way, or almost solvent.
Yeah,
right.
Close to
Almost
solvent.
So
134, okay.
okay.
and I was saying, with the CSO added into that too, I mean, we're kind of at the end of that too. I mean, I know we're gonna have to take on some debt.
Yeah.
and stuff like that, too.
The
That's the
projected,
big one.
we're getting to the end, and the projected debt service is pretty reasonable
Yeah.
at this point. So continuing to collect about what we're collecting on the surcharge side will be more than sufficient, assuming everything else, assuming we're done. When we're done, there may be other projects that have to be done because of new laws or whatever. But with what we know now, we're in a pretty good shape. Okay, are we ready to move on from
Okay.
budget?
Are we going to consider garbage rates?
Oh
at
yes,
different
I'm
times?
sorry. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Talk to us about garbage.
We have just round about, say, 2,450 garbage customers. And we're looking at potentially a shortfall around $75,000 already in that fund budget. It would take a significant rate increase to wipe that out totally. But if we do nothing, we're gonna get farther behind.
$30 a year.
So it may be one of those areas where you need to at least make an incremental
Yeah, maybe
consideration.
try to space it out, instead of doing it
Yeah.
all at one time.
Let's see. The garbage beyond tires and normal maintenance. But landfill costs, it's just, ash dumpster expenses have been incredible this year. Double what they were, previous years. So. Depends on your appetite for rate changes.
Something Elaine and I need to look at a little more, but is because of that we don't want to recommend to you to reduce the water surcharge significantly, that we're reducing it this year and coming back to you next year
Yeah.
and saying the overall water rate needs to go up. But people don't really care about the individual things on their bill. They care about the total bill. So, once we have a chance to play around a little more at next month's meeting, work session, I think we'll be able to, the budget will be further along, and then I think we'll be able to give you some rate recommendations and maybe there's some increases, but there's a small decrease in the water surcharge fund, if that sounds palatable, to try and make everything kind of not be a huge hit on any.
Do we rebalance them, like up the rate and of the one and decrease the rate of the surcharge so that pretty much equals out for people's bills?
Yeah.
Because where you enter it in the budget makes a difference too. You can't over collect on the surcharge and then
You can't
flip
move
it
it
to-
from
yeah.
the surcharge fund to the garbage fund.
Yeah.
It needs to be where you've collected it is
Right.
where it is used.
So we just kind of have to rebalance it so that people don't see that they're being socked or anything. Technical language.
Yeah. Yeah, we could do that. That would be helpful.
Evaluate that and come to you with a recommendation.
Okay, yeah.
And being an outside city person, I've brought in my utility bill and compared it to a city utility bill, and it's water and sewer is cheaper in the city of Frostburg than it is in the county district that I live in. And paying a private hauler it seems like every other month that rate is going up. So. Okay.
Thank you.
Next, Bethany has a Board of Zoning Appeals appointment.
Yes, Kitty Davis has been our alternate member on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and her term expires later this month. She is seeking to renew that, if you all would be agreeable.
Gotcha.
Okay, that'll be a resolution at your council meeting. Elaine has a proposal for auditing services for the coming 3 years.
Huber Michaels presented a proposal. They've broken it out in more detail with the uncertainty of how many major programs they would have to audit as part of a single audit. So there's a base audit charge, single audit charge, and then a major program charge. So depending on, what's required for them, for the federal requirements would impact the total cost of the audit. But obviously, when they have to do that additional work, there is a fee involved. And as they pointed out in their proposal, they did not increase our fees in prior years for some things that they could have as new auditing requirements were implemented. So this is somewhat of a catch-up as well. Our total audit that was just completed, we paid $60,700. That also included some fees for additional work that was required. We had a good working relationship with them for the entire time I've been a city employee, so I recommend moving forward.
This is the Elaine meeting today. Elaine has also a proposed ordinance that would change some language in the city code.
So the way the city code has been written and implemented in the past, customers receive their real estate tax bills in July. If it's an owner-occupied property, they have the option of paying in 2 installments per state law, 1 installment by September 30th, the second by December 31st. If it's non-owner occupied, the tax has to be paid in full by September 30th. What's unusual in our code is the statement that says anything that is delinquent, interest is retroactive to July 1st. So for example, if someone did not pay their first installment that was due September 30th, come October 1st, we aren't adding 1 month of interest, we're adding 4 months. We're charging them for July, August, September, and October. I've reached out to other municipalities, done research on what others do. No one else does that. If we have someone whose second payment's due in December, if they haven't paid it by December, come January 1st, we're doing 7 months of interest, go to payment all the way back to July 1st. So to be consistent with other municipalities and not unduly penalize residents, I would recommend that statement retroactive to July 1st be stricken. And if you're late on October 1st, you're charged 1 month of interest. If you're late December 31st, come January, you're paying 1 month of interest. It's not a significant, hit to the city's interest on taxes, but
Simple and fair.
yes. And the way the tax billing for personal properties was written, when the code was done, it was back when we were creating billings every 2 weeks in Excel through mail merge documents. And so it was written, taxes calculated before the 15th of the month have a certain due date, after the 15th have a different due date. When we implemented the new software in 2019 and began billing through that system, we only bill once a month at the end of the month. We just like to clean up the wording and make the interest due dates as stated in Maryland law that says if you're billed in July and August, you can pay without interest by September 30th. If you're billed in September or any subsequent month, you have until the end of the next month, not less than 30 days after the billing date, to pay without penalty. It would just simplify the interest.
Makes sense.
We just have to make sure Michael can clean up the language, but
I think you did a fine job, Elaine.
I'm not a lawyer, I should have passed it off to a lawyer. In principle, that's what we like to do.
Okay. That'll be an ordinance probably that's introduced at your March meeting. There's some other code changes that Nick and Hayden have requested, but that's more complicated, so we're not ready for those yet. So we'll work on those. Okay, ARPA projects. Hayden has one.
Yeah, this is more of just a heads up. So the salt facility construction, the design is coming to a close now, and then for the actual construction of it, given that the ARPA money is mostly used up, I want to take some of the money out of the general sewer fund, which we already allocated $150 a year for the general sewer, and just put that towards the salt facility. Hoping to get it out to bid, old building demoed, new building built this summer, so that we can fill the new one with salt and not have any lag time, and not have somewhere to put salt. So I don't have a proposal for you yet. I just wanted to get everything on your guys' radar that we'll have to shift some funds around from the ARPA general sewer, because we haven't been using all that money, and I don't foresee us needing all that money. And the salt building is more important. So as soon as I have a final design, I'll get the contract together, and then that'll be the next thing for the salt building. But short and sweet.
And then, so we don't have we're just beginning design on the parking lot too, but to earmark those projects for ARPA money, Lydia had recommended just doing the ARPA approval resolution, and then obviously once the bids are in place and everything, you do your second awarding the contract resolution. But if it's okay with you, those two projects would be a ARPA approval resolution this coming month. Okay. And then Lydia can kind of change her working spreadsheet around to show that those are committed projects. Discussion items. So we've been, a couple years ago, 2019, we started using iCompass as the meeting portal. Every other software tool that we use, other than the permits component, is all now owned by Civic Plus. They bought our website, they bought MuniCode, so that our website and online code that was through MuniCode is now owned by Civic Plus. The Public Information Act request portal that we're working on implementing, that's through Civic Plus. Like, everything is owned by Civic Plus
It's like the
now.
Amazon of
Yeah.
municipal government.
So, not that I want to go through another like technology change, but I think it's more cost effective to switch to the MuniCode solution, and it will be a different interface, but it will be more integrated with the website as well. So I wanted to talk to you about that, make sure you didn't have any objections. There's no formal action needed, but I just wanted to make sure everyone was agreeable to that. The live stream, the time stamping, the search, all of those tools exist, just kind of in a different capacity. It will definitely have a different look to it, but I like iCompass, but I just think making the switch is in the long-term best interest. Okay. Thanks.
We can wait on Piney Dam. I'm still in a whole pattern with MDE and MES. So.
Okay. We're going to just go with the just kidding on that one. Oh, I forgot something. Another resolution so last month you approved under ARPA projects computers to be, all the like ruggedized laptops for the police cars to be purchased. And so that was an ARPA approval and then a resolution as well to make that purchase because it exceeded $25,000. Talking to Sergeant Mulaney just yesterday, and he realized that in his conversations with Dell, who the laptops would be coming from, is he didn't select the touchscreen option, and with them being in the car and not having a mouse, obviously the touchscreen is much preferred than trying to do this touchpad thing. So he's working on getting an updated quote. I expect it to be $4,000 to $5,000 more for the 10 computers, but if you're amenable to that, I'd like to do a new resolution that approves that greater expense. Okay. So that'll be a resolution as well. That is all I have. If there's any general discussion or concerns that you want to bring forward.
I'm going to miss the April City Council meetings because I'm going to be on my way to Georgia.
Okay.
Leo, pardon?
Midnight
Midnight train, yes.
Sing out loud so much better. Anybody else have anything?
The only other thing I wanted to note is the closed session. That was some back and forth emails that seemed like forever ago, but with your attorneys representing you in the opioid litigation have requested a closed session to give you an update and ask for some decisions to be made moving forward. Because you have the same city attorney and opioid attorney as the city of Cumberland, we're proposing that just be a joint closed session at Cumberland City Hall. So what would happen is their mayor and council would move to adjourn to closed session, and then you all in Cumberland would move to adjourn to closed session. but that will be a public notice, like, go out like all the other meetings, but, so it's gonna be a little goofy that you're having a closed session in Cumberland, but, I just wanted to make you all aware of that.
Is that 2:30 at a different time than what they said at first? I thought they said 3.
I know. I don't know. I'll confirm. I'm not sure, Nina. I thought both too.
Because the green team meets at 4.
I'll find out
Okay.
and confirm time. Okay.
We good? Anybody have anything? Thank you all, appreciate it very much.
Pump stations in, by the